Okay, we'll now move to item 10, which is adopt an ordinance calling for a special election to be held March 4, 2025, for the purpose of voting upon an amendment to San Mateo County Charter, granting the Board of Supervisors the authority until December 31, 2028, to remove an elected sheriff for cause by a 4/5 vote of supervisors. This is brought forward by Supervisor Mueller and Corzo. Do you have any comments?
I do have a comment. I see now that the sheriff is represented by counsel. Is that correct?
What I'd note is we've received correspondence from counsel that indicate that the sheriff has requested separate counsel. The board hasn't yet acted on that matter. I guess that's what I would say.
Okay, well, to the extent the sheriff is indicating she has counsel, the last time she appeared before this board, she indicated that she would consider testifying before the board once she had counsel. We made that request to her when she was here, and she said that she was going out the door. She refused, obviously, to participate in the investigation when it was taking place, the independent investigation. So I would like to once again invite her, now that she's represented by counsel, at least we've seen correspondence purported to saying that she's represented by counsel, to please provide testimony to this board. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about is last night we received a letter from the sheriff, and I have some real concerns about the letter because the letter, one of what gave rise to all of this is really, to sort of summarize it in the beginning, was the way the complaints we had from employees about how they were being treated within the department. So much so now that it's risen to the level that all of the sworn union personnel have voted and are unanimous. They're calling for her to resign. The captains have called for her to resign. The only sworn personnel in the office who's still supporting her on record is the second undersheriff she's had. In that backdrop, last night, the sheriff sent us a letter and said, and she was questioning again the veracity of the texts that it's been said and alleged came from her phone and that we've had forensically looked at. And she said in her sentence, would the county have hired a company to trace a text to my phone that one former employee claims came from me? And the problem I have with that sentence is that witness 3 is not a former employee. Witness 3 still works for the county of San Mateo in the sheriff's department. And so I don't know, as I sit here today, is the sheriff saying that she intends to fire witness 3 now? Why is she referring to as a former employee? And that has given me great pause, that we still are in a circumstance where the sheriff is communicating about people who have taken part of this investigation and is either talking about the future or giving a threat. I don't know what this means that she refers to her that way as former when she is not, or they are not. And we know the witness knows who, the sheriff knows who this person is because the sheriff and Mr. Anjay has referred to this witness in news interviews. So I am really taken aback by that, and it's in that context today that we're really moving forward to protect the employees of this county.
Supervisor Corzo.
Thank you. So I wanted to just kind of take a step back and share that typically when we have these kinds of resolutions or proposals, the second reading can go on the consent agenda, and we don't need to have a public forum unless it's pulled by a member of the public. But we put this on the agenda because we recognize that there are a lot of questions about why this is happening, why now. There are questions about the report. So I want to take the chance to address some of those concerns proactively. And again, restate that this board has been, and will continue to be committed to transparency, accountability, and doing what is in the best interest of the public good. So I'd like to set the record straight on a few misconceptions that I've heard in the community, specifically about the report. And I want to make sure people understand that this is an independent human resources investigation. As someone who served for many years on a school board, I have seen many of these kinds of investigations done. And I want to be really clear that these are not popularity contests. These are not meant to be a platform for anyone being investigated, for anyone to have their cheerleaders give character references. These kinds of investigations are done to investigate serious allegations and then make determinations based on credibility and facts about whether these kinds of allegations are sustained, unfounded, or even inconclusive. And through the years, I have seen many of these kinds of reports determine that there wasn't enough evidence to determine whether something was sustained or unfounded. And even, as a school board member, I've seen these kinds of investigations come back as inconclusive when, personally, I thought that the allegations were credible and that the complainants were credible. But that's not the case here. I have never, in my 7 years as an elected official, seen an investigation, first of all, that has 15 allegations that are being investigated. I want people to understand how rare that is. That is not normal. And I think it speaks to the level of severity of what is happening in our sheriff's office. 12 of the 15 allegations were sustained. And I also want to explain to the public that these kinds of investigations are not necessarily required to be done by a former judge like we had in this report. This, reputable independent investigators do not have to be former judges. They are not courtrooms. They are not required, or even is it normal to have complainants, under oath, because they're not courtrooms. So I want people to understand that. I also want to say that, if this matter does make it into a court of law, I am really confident that anyone who lies under oath can and will face consequences for not telling the truth. And in this case, I believe that is our sheriff. She has used many tactics that are greatly questionable. Tactics that we see around delaying, denying, deflecting, loudly, publicly, in front of the cameras. Because someone is loud does not make them righteous or does not make them truthful. And I want the community to know that. We have many civil employees, most of who are women, all of who are women, the complainants in the report who were interviewed. And they are not represented by a union. They are not represented or protected by unions. And they are extremely vulnerable to this day because of the conditions that they have had to work under. Earlier today, we saw many, many of our county employees being celebrated, being respected for their work. And we have those kinds of employees in the sheriff's office who, just because of the mere willpower they have for their families, for our community, have endured treatment that no one should have to work under. So I want to take a second now to also address some other questions that I've heard in the community. Does this charter amendment being placed on the ballot take away the power from the voters? And I want to be very clear, no, it does not. This is going to be in front of the voters. The voters will inform themselves and they will make educated votes. And why now? Because this matter continues to harm people in the sheriff's office. What we are seeing has never happened before. And we cannot delay. We can't. The people of the county of San Mateo will decide for themselves if they want to pass this charter amendment, and they will do so just like they would in any election. They will be presented with facts, they will come to their own conclusions, and it is up to the community to educate themselves and for us as a board and us as a community to make sure that we understand really what's happening here. And I've also heard, that we should wait for a recall. And while a recall is the right of the voters, I want to again reiterate that a recall is really a huge lift for community, especially a countywide recall. About 46 signatures would be required to even place something on the ballot for a recall to be put on the ballot at all. And what we see here is, continued violations of county policy, continued harm to sheriff's office employees, and honestly, even I would say every county employee and every county resident is being impacted by this. This is not something that anyone would ever choose to be subjected to. But it is our responsibility as a board to offer the community solutions. And that is what we're doing here today by taking this vote. One more thing I want to address, why is this board, there have been questions about why this board never took any similar action for previous sheriffs, and I said this last time and I will say it again. I was not on this board for any previous decisions. I don't know the facts of any decisions that were made. That is not my responsibility. My responsibility as a county supervisor is to make decisions right now for the matters before us, and that is what we're doing. And I want to also just recognize that I had, and I still have, criticisms about former sheriffs in this county, and that is a huge part of why I supported Sheriff Corpus to be our sheriff in this county. I will say again that our sheriff has proven to be a sheriff that we cannot trust, and so what the board that we will take, the vote that we will take will be based on facts, and again, with a commitment to transparency, accountability, and doing what is right for the public good. We cannot sit here and do nothing. And I refuse now and always to, look past what I believe to be corruption. And in terms of due process, I want it to be very clear that the sheriff had an opportunity to participate in the investigation and chose not to. The sheriff has been invited by this board to come before this board to have a conversation, and she has chosen not to. The sheriff went in front of cameras and said that she was disappointed that I didn't speak to her. And then when I did, she shared a voicemail for the media that was, I'm sorry, not threatening at all. But I do believe that our sheriff must resign. And if she doesn't, and we have to move forward with this election in March, she will be responsible for the millions of dollars that it will cost our county taxpayers to hold that special election. I will just wrap up by saying that I personally believe that this is the best option before us. We must place this on the ballot. Our sheriff needs to be held accountable. No one is above the law. No one should be above the law. And with that, I will conclude my comments and just last thing say that the will of the voters will decide what happens in our community. And that is something that I believe to my core. And we will move forward with the will of the voters. Thank you.
Supervisor Pine.
Vice Mueller.
So first, Supervisor Corzo, you said 46 signatures. I think you meant 46,000?
Yes.
Okay. And then secondly, there was just a couple of things that I just wanted to add. There have been, I saw a text from a reporter, I think, and it's been put out into the world that all of the it's somehow known that all of the witnesses in the report were former Sheriff Bolanos supporters in the campaign. That is absolutely false. The reporter who put that out there should retract that. Some of the people in this report, these witnesses, were some of the Sheriff Corpus's most ardent supporters during her campaign. It's just false. I don't know how that could even be reported. The second thing that I wanted to share is with respect to the recall, and County Council, if you could verify this. If a recall was initiated in hypothetically early December, if the county were to take its full time, if the elections office were to take its full time that it's statutorily allowed to verify signatures, and if the full time was necessary to gather signatures, that may push the election date into 2026.
That's true. I think the earliest a recall could feasibly take place would be November of 2025. Probably more likely it would be April of 2026.
Right. So for it to take place in November 2025, hypothetically, that would mean all the signatures would gather in an earlier amount of time than statutorily allowed, and also the verification of those signatures would happen faster than statutorily allowed.
A lot of things would have to fall into place optimally in order for November 2025 to happen.
So I want people to understand that the circumstances and the working conditions that we're hearing from our employees resoundingly in the sheriff's office that exist today, absent this charter amendment process, that they would be in those working conditions possibly until 2026. So you have that effect on employees that we're concerned about as supervisors. But not only that, I want everyone to think about what the effect of that is in terms of our readiness for a public safety event. What does that dysfunction mean if we were to have a major public safety event in this county during that interim time period? We can't take that risk. That's how I feel about it, looking this as a supervisor today. I'm going to, I feel like this is why we have to put this in front of the voters. Look at all of the circumstances and use your best choice. That's all we can do, is present you with the evidence we've been presented with, share with you the concerns that we have about it, and ask you, the voter, what you think should be done.
I would just want to reiterate one point made by my colleagues, which is ultimately this will be the decision of the public, whether or not to grant the Board of Supervisors this authority. The public will have the opportunity to assess all the facts and circumstances and consider whether this is a power it wants to grant to us. So in that regard, I think it's fair to the public. Supervisor Slocum, would you have any comment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pine. Obviously, this is a very difficult position that we're in. It's a difficult vote that we are about to undertake. I think it's unprecedented in the county's history. And the bottom line for me here is that I have mixed feelings about putting this on the ballot. Why do I have those mixed feelings? Well, it does lead to a campaign. And Supervisor Pine, you just said the voters will consider the facts. But I'm not so sure that that's totally accurate, because I do not believe that the sheriff will fight this campaign with facts. I know that we will, but I don't believe the sheriff will. And my questions around this are, what happens if this passes? What happens if it fails? Um, maybe council could just briefly walk through that in a minute here. But for me, the recall path is probably the most appealing just on its surface. But if we're talking April of 2026 or sometime soon before that, I just can't imagine being an employee working under the circumstances that have existed and that exist today. I have a concern about, and I know there's a sunset provision for this, but I do have concerns about future boards. And as I said, even though there's a sunset, I still have that nagging feeling that it shouldn't be left to future boards. Maybe it wouldn't be given the sunset. I'm curious, and maybe somebody could answer this, maybe Supervisor Mueller or Corzo, or maybe county executive or county attorney. I'm curious about if we're still getting whistleblower complaints or complaints from the staff in the sheriff's office. I'm concerned about the lawsuits that most likely will come from this and the cost thereto. And I'm curious, finally, with another question, that if the sheriff were to resign sometime between now and March, would the sheriff retain her county retirement and county benefits that she may otherwise be entitled to? So there's a few questions in there. I don't know, county attorney, if you made note of those or if you could respond.
Thank you, Supervisor Slocum. Maybe I'll start with what would happen if the county charter amendment were to pass. And a couple things I wanted to note is what the charter amendment states specifically is that if the board were to seek to exercise its power under the charter amendment and endeavor to remove the sheriff by a 4/5 vote, a couple things that are specifically required to happen is one, that the sheriff would have to be served with a written statement of alleged grounds for removal, and would have to be provided a reasonable opportunity to be heard regarding any explanation or defense. The charter amendment also provides that the Board of Supervisors may provide for procedures by which a removal proceeding pursuant to the charter would be conducted. So I would anticipate that the board would have a meeting at which the board would establish procedures and that written notice, a written statement of alleged grounds for removal would be provided, and then there'd be an opportunity for a hearing at which the sheriff would have the opportunity to offer explanation or defense. That's what the charter amendment sets forth. So that's what would happen procedurally if this charter amendment were to pass.
Could I stop you there for just a moment and thank you for that thorough explanation? I'm curious, the part about the sheriff has a chance to come forward and respond. When in your best thinking might that take place, assuming we approve this item 10?
Again, I anticipate that would occur pursuant to the charter. That would occur at some point after the March election date, at a point after the Board of Supervisors has served a written statement of alleged grounds for removal. So we'd be talking about some point after the election in March.
And there would be, I know this may be off base, but there would be no way to get that testimony into the record ahead of the election.
Well, there's nothing that would stop that kind of a conversation from taking place. If if the parties were inclined to do that, but again, the specific process set forth in the charter contemplates written notice, then a response, or an opportunity to be heard with respect to the written notice. So, but again, nothing to stop a conversation taking place in a different on a different track if the parties were inclined to have that kind of a conversation.
Yeah, my question is based on Supervisor Mueller's invitation to the sheriff that now that she has counsel to come forward and appear before the board and
Right.
testify.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
And nothing you're
Thank you.
talking about doing here would foreclose that happening if again, the parties were inclined.
Thank you.
A next question were, well, one of the questions was with respect to pensions, and I do note that the fact that somebody resigns in and of itself has no impact on a person's pension. There are some provisions, in law that I believe PEPRA, Public Employee Pension Reform Act, I think included some specific provisions that noted that if somebody were convicted of certain crimes while in office, I'm not suggesting that is relevant here, but there are some provisions under PEPRA that would deprive folks of pension benefits dating from the time at which misconduct was first found to have occurred. But again, that requires a criminal conviction if I'm not misrecalling. So to go back to my primary point, resigning in of itself has no bearing on pension benefits.
So just to be clear, if she resigned before the recall election, she would be entitled to her retirement, for instance, and other benefits.
To my knowledge, yeah.
Yes. And if this ballot measure appeared and it was approved by the voters, her benefit package would be not available to her?
I don't believe that's true either. I think if she was removed, I don't think that removal in and of itself would impact her entitlement to pension benefits.
So she would get her benefits in either scenario. Okay.
I believe that's true, yes.
Okay. Go ahead. Thank you. Next.
I think the last question is whether or not we continue to get complaints. I'm a little, I'm hesitant to answer all that. That's at this point kind of HR related matters. So I frankly want to, I guess that's where I'd want to leave it, whether or not we're continuing to receive complaints.
Supervisor Mueller?
I wanted to follow up on a question that, or argument might be more of a theme that Supervisor Slocum talked about, and that was communication. Should we pass the charter amendment today, communication during the time period before the election? We are going to be prohibited after today. Well, from talking, it'll be after if we vote today, it goes on the ballot. It becomes a political issue for whether or not people vote. So we won't be able to campaign for it with county resources. Correct?
There's generally a bar under California law in using county resources, government agency resources, to either support or oppose a measure that's on the ballot. On the other hand, I mean, the law is clear. Their case, Stanson v. Mott is kind of the premier case in this area, and it sets forth that there's a distinction that should be drawn between informational educating of the public versus advocacy. And there's sort of a time, place, tenor standard that needs to be applied when you look at the communications that are taking place while a measure is pending. And so I guess what I'd say is we have to be very careful all around as a county, and county agencies, county departments would have to be very careful all around in terms of how they're using county resources to communicate, because while information and information sharing, educating the public is authorized, advocacy is not. So again, you've got to look closely at the tenor, the timing, et cetera, with respect to communications to ensure that we don't run afoul of the legal principle you were just articulating. So it's fair to say we'll spend a fair amount of time, I believe, looking at that going forward.
And the sheriff similarly is prohibited.
All county departments, employees are prohibited from using county resources, government agency resources for advocacy purposes. That's true.
So the sheriff would be prohibited, for instance, from using a newsletter or using Nextdoor or using her letterhead to send out mass communications about the charter amendment if it was considered to be campaigning?
We'd have to work very closely with the sheriff and any other county department or any other county officials, including the board, to on that same issue. The same legal standard applies.
And is that a civil standard or is that a criminal standard to use county resources to campaign?
It's a criminal statute.
Thank you.
All right, let's other comments at this time.
I've actually said a lot, Supervisor Pine, but there was one other thing I was hoping to add to the mix just for clarity, if I could.
Go ahead.
I want to note that, as Supervisor Corzo noted, this is adoption of an ordinance. This ordinance was actually introduced at a prior meeting. This is not adoption of an ordinance to amend the charter, but those looking at the packet for today's meeting will note that there's also a resolution included with this item. There's the ordinance, and then there's a resolution. And the resolution is calling for and providing for a special election, et cetera. And just want to be clear on why we included a resolution with this and what the point and the purpose of the resolution is. And we've done this for a couple reasons. First, while the election for a charter amendment under California law, very specifically, must be called by an ordinance, the law also provides that for any special local election, the board must issue a proclamation or a resolution calling the election, and that's embedded in the election code. We did include some language in the ordinance that proclaims an election, but kind of in the spirit of belt and suspenders and making sure that we've dotted I's and crossed T's, we also prepared this resolution calling the election. Also, I want to note that a request to consolidate an election with any other potential elections occurring on March 4th, 2025 must be made by resolution. So on the off chance that there's some other thing that's going to go to the ballot in March of 2025, which I guess we'd know in a few days, we want to make sure that we're able to consolidate. And this resolution makes that request. And I just would note that Los Angeles County, which included, which as we've discussed in a prior meeting, did something very similar to what we're talking about doing here. They also included both an ordinance and a resolution for their charter amendment election, again, back in November of 2022. So again, that's why we have the two items.
All right, thank you for that additional information. Supervisor Corzo?
I just wanted to, before we go to public comment, make a couple more clarifications. I want folks to understand that our sheriff right now is serving during a 6-year term. We are wrapping up year 2. There are 4 more years left before the voters would have an opportunity to vote on new leadership in the sheriff's office without an intervention like a charter amendment election or a recall. So I want to make sure folks understand that so that they can understand what the urgency is. And I also wanted to make sure people understand that votes of no confidence have been taken and statements have been made by every level of the sheriff's sworn officers, the deputy sheriffs, the sergeants, the lieutenants, the captains. That is not normal. Every single level. And civilian staff, most of which who are women, all of the complainants, all of the staff, the civil staff that made allegations that were ultimately found to be sustained, are women. And so what we have in front of us is a situation where, you know, our first female sheriff has failed to protect women under, you know, in the sheriff's office. And that, you know, is something that I will not sit by and continue to watch while doing nothing. So I want to also share that, you know, we will hear right now public comment, and I expect it to be challenging, but that is what public comment is for, and we will be responsive to it. It's literally our job. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Corzo. All right, let's now move to public comment. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Supervisor Pine. We'll take public comments from chambers first, and then we'll hear from Zoom. We'll start with Christopher Ulrich, followed by Mark DePola. And please speak directly into the mic, and you'll have a minute. Christopher Ulrich. So Christopher's not here, or? Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna call on the speaker. So if you hear your name, please come up. Thomas Mazzulla. Mazuka, please come up.
Good morning, members of the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Callaghy, Mr. Niblin. We are council representing Sheriff Christina Corpus. We've been working with Sheriff Corpus for a little over a week. We are here to ask that this matter be continued. We've sent letters to Mr. Niblin, your county council, to give us an opportunity to respond to the allegations. We're talking about a report that's unsubstantiated. You seem to know more about the report than we do, Supervisor Mueller, but it's anonymous to us. You're right. The sheriff has not presented her side of the story yet, probably due to a lack of confidence, to potential conflicts of interest, but we're going to have a serious conversation with the sheriff about doing that. And I hear from the supervisors there's a sense of urgency to get this done. Urgency to you, the members of this board who are attorneys, is not a reason to eliminate due process or the sheriff's constitutional rights. Now, I come to you with a background of 10 years as an assistant DA in San Francisco, 9 years as an assistant United States attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office as the law enforcement coordinator, working with all the agencies in San Mateo County, also as a police commissioner for 12 years. I've been through 3 changes of police chiefs. I've hired 3, and guess what? There's never happiness amongst the staff. Morale is always low. It takes time. And like my old boss, the U.S. Attorney's Office, said, Bob Mueller, when he took over the FBI, there's a third of the people just not going to like you, a third that will like you, and a third that you're going to have to win over. And we need to give the sheriff that chance. Law enforcement is a unique thing. The community, crime is down. The stats are down. That's who you need. You cannot usurp the authority of the community. Crime is down, and staffing the sheriff department is up. I want to say one thing. Morale's low. I can tell you right now, I know the men and women of the sheriff's department are still responding to calls for service to serve their community, no matter who's in charge. There's a lot of questions from this board. There's a lot of uncertainty about the process. I ask that you continue this matter to protect the sheriff's rights, because it's the right thing to do. When you did the Pledge of Allegiance, you said justice for all. Justice, especially for you lawyers on this board, we need to give the sheriff an opportunity to respond. This is premature for you to usurp the authority of the voters. And I thank you for giving me additional time.
Thank you. Christopher Ulrich, followed by Mark DePaula. And as a reminder, through the acting chair, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Good morning. I am colleagues with Tip Mizuko and also counsel for Sheriff Christina Corpus. I echo what he says and request a delay. I know the allegations are serious, but at this point, they are just allegations. I understand it was an esteemed investigator. Many of the people she interviewed, by her own admission, were complainants. It doesn't look to us as though she really tried to verify or check against their allegations. Now, I understand we are not in a court of law, and this is a political process. We are just across the walkway, though, from the courthouse. And every day in that courthouse, allegations are made, and the person against whom those allegations are made has an opportunity to respond. I understand you offered that to Ms. Corpus previously. She now has counsel, and we are requesting that this board delay this vote and give her an opportunity to fully respond. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mark DePaula, followed by Monica Berlin.
The Board of Supervisors should not be involved in a recall with the current Sheriff from Corpus. Sheriff Corpus was elected by San Mateo County voters Why has a Board of Supervisors take such action when the same Board of Supervisors had hired Judge Cordell to investigate District Attorney Wagstaff? District Attorney Wagstaff said he would not cooperate with Judge Cordell regarding the Batmobile case, which San Mateo County deputies went to Indiana to harass an innocent car body man on the behalf of a rich San Mateo County real estate individual. Why hasn't the Board of Supervisors asked for a recall of San Mateo County District Attorney Wagstaff? 2007, the former sheriff and undersheriff were caught in a sex slave house with underage Hispanic girl. This was called Operation Dollhouse by the FBI. In 2014, the sheriff was reelected and shortly resigned, and the Board of Supervisors appointed the undersheriff to sheriff. In 2018, the Board of Supervisors endorsed the appointment of knowing what had happened in 2007. I have the disc from the FBI, and I'm sure the Board of Supervisors would not want them.
Thank you. The next speaker is Monica Berlin, followed by Heather Colbert. I'm not sure if she's speaking on this item, but we'll check.
Hello, good morning. My name is Monica Berlin, and I just wanted to come down here to speak in favor of Sheriff Corpus. I live in Half Moon Bay in the Half Moon Bay community my entire life. Whenever I encounter deputies on duty in Half Moon Bay, and I ask them about Christina Corpus because I was very supportive of her campaign and how great she is, I always see deputies' faces light up when I engage them about Christina Corpus. I've never heard anybody complain about her. So I think she's done amazing things with the sheriff's office, like crime is down and morale of the deputies I encounter is up. And I just want to say the report is completely unsubstantiated, and it's inappropriate for you, Miss Corzo, with all your distracting jewelry. It's very distracting with your nose ring and your earrings, and it's inappropriate. But I think for you all to be attacking her just shows more about you. And I know you're all corrupt, and hopefully next year your time will be up. And corruption has been your way of doing business, but with Donald Trump coming back and the death penalty for pedophiles, hopefully we won't have to see you anymore.
Thank you. Heather Colbert. Okay, thank you. No additional speakers from chambers, so Madam Clerk, please proceed.
Thank you. We are on item number 10 with 10 speakers. Allison Madden, followed by Samina Usman. Allison, please unmute and begin.
Hello, good morning. I think it's shocking the speed and hysteria with which this board, as currently constituted, has been handling this issue. Yes, we've read the report. It's disrespectful to the voters to take this action at this time and keep telling us to read the report. 2 of you are terming out and will be unaccountable to voters for your vote today. I predict the rest of you will have a challenge with your reelection. You should wait for the newly elected supervisors to take their seats before any action is taken on this issue. That is the most recent expression of the people's will. I based my vote for my supervisor for my area on the candidate's specific response to support for the sheriff in text about this issue, and the campaign responded. It's not surprising that the fraternization rule is being used against a woman and a woman of minority background, and I'm not joking, just like Fonnie Willis. This county should eliminate that rule or amend it going forward for disclosure, or look at every male and female or even supervisor. This sheriff is a reformer. She's the only one in this county that cares about the women in incarceration. And specifically, one of the personnel issues that the rank and file don't like is she wants overtime to be in the jails, which is entirely proper. She cares about women and she's a reformer. Lodoris Cordell was the worst
Thank
pick.
you. If you need to wrap up.
Yeah, a panel of 3, like an arbitration, would have been proper. And Lodoris Cordell went to the mat for Judge Persky in the Brock Turner case. People should look that up. She was the wrong person to hire. Thank you.
Thank you. Samina Usman, followed by Nancy Goodman. Just a reminder, please adhere to the 1-minute timer. Samina, please unmute and begin.
Hello, my name is Samina Usman, and I'm speaking on behalf of Secure Justice. We're calling for a special election on March 4th to vote on the proposed amendment to the charter. Um, the thing is that we need to grant the authority to remove the sheriff without the sunset clause, because otherwise we're going to have to do this at a taxpayer expense. Accountability is the cornerstone of public trust in our democratic institutions, particularly in law enforcement. While elected officials must retain independence, there must be safeguards to ensure that they act in the best interests of the community. Calling for a special election allows for the voters of San Mateo County to make their voices heard on this critical issue. It ensures ample time for the community education and engagement, and empowers the residents to fully understand the implications of this charter amendment. This is the opportunity to strengthen public confidence in our institutions and reaffirm your commitment to accountability and justice. I urge you to take this step. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Goodman, followed by Joaquin Jimenez. Nancy, please unmute and begin.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nancy Goodman. I live in Redwood City. I'm with Fix in San Mateo County. Thank you for what you're doing. I do support it. We are at such a critical juncture with regard to public safety in this community, as Supervisors Miller and Corzo have outlined. The current sheriff is the only one in the department who seems to support the current undersheriff is the only one in the department who still seems to support the current sheriff, but she refuses to participate in any solutions. This provides an opportunity for you to safeguard against similar problems in the future. I hope that you will look at creating a regular ongoing Inspector General position to provide an independent channel where people can raise concerns and questions, and the opportunity to address problems before they become such a liability. The Inspector General would develop a communication protocol with the Sheriff's Office, be able to make policy and practice recommendations to your board and to the Sheriff. I also hope that you will ask ICAC to weigh in their role as advisory to your board. It's time to give them duties, powers. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Nancy. Joaquin Jimenez, followed by Ron Snow. Joaquin, please unmute and begin.
Good morning again. My name is Joaquin Jimenez. I am the mayor for the city of Half Moon Bay, but I'm speaking as a concerned citizen. I support Sheriff Christina Corpus 100%. And no, I do not agree to give you my vote, to give you my permission to ask her to resign, to remove her from her position. This is a witch hunt. If Christina Corpus would have been a man, this would not be happening. She has changed the community. She has helped the community. The crime rate in the coast has dropped significantly. If some of you were to be investigated about special events, special parties, many of you will have to be removed. And again, I do not give you my permission. I do not give you my vote for you to remove Sheriff Christina Corpus. I support her 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Six hands, Ron Snow, followed by Cindy. Ron, please unmute and begin.
Yes, Supervisors, thank you for listening. I do think that there's been a lack of transparency. I searched through the county notes on this thing, and there's no counter arguments that are posted. George Galen, I think, was the person who did a very good analysis of the judge's report and points out so many different flaws and opinionated statements that I think it's important for that report to be posted, as well as some of these other areas. To only allow 1 minute is an example of why the public isn't being allowed to have a countermeasure. The other one is, I think this has just gone too far, too fast. I got notified a week or so ago of a meeting that was supposed to happen in 2 hours. So there wasn't even a meeting by Mueller that said that there was going to be more information disclosed. No time to react to that, no time to schedule for that. So I hope that you slow this down, allow the new Board of Supervisors to vote on this and make this happen later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy, followed by James C. Johnson. Cindy, please unmute and begin.
Hi, my name is Cindy McReynolds, and thank you for this opportunity to talk. And I would like to know, I've heard the supervisors that they all have their own opinion, which appears to be in contrast to what the constituents of San Mateo County have. I have not heard anybody that is representing the people, and I thought this board was supposed to represent the people of San Mateo County, yet we have no complaints, we have no recall, and we're happy with the sheriff. We're unhappy with the prior sheriff and the prior actions of the Board of Supervisors, and two of them are still on the board that didn't do anything about prior indiscretions. Another thing I would like to bring up is that this is tyranny, that for you to take our constitutional votes and then not give us the opportunity to recall anybody, I don't know if you're going to put somebody in or we'll vote for a new sheriff, but have you, I just want to know if you registered with the Secretary of State and are following the election code in regards to your recall in your campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. James C. Johnson, followed by Andrea Hall. James, please unmute and begin.
James C. Johnson here, Redwood City. Been with Redwood City for 40 years. I just want to reiterate to the Board of Supervisors, you guys do not have the authority to remove the sheriff. You guys could make suggestions and policies and use the code in San Mateo County as a Rubik's Cube to justify your fraudulent agenda, but you do not have the authority to trump the votes of San Mateo County. 60% of the people voted for Christina. Crime rate is down. I've also spoken to over dozens of sheriff's officers. I've also spoken to Mike, who's sitting on the left-hand side there, in San Carlos. And this is a witch hunt. This is a witch hunt. Mike's the devil behind the curtain that's justifying this agenda, and he's promoting and pushing the Board of Supervisors to go along and remove the vote. You have 5 people sitting there, and you guys want to remove 30,000, 40,000 votes that voted for Christina Corpus with no justification whatsoever. And if, in fact, you guys follow the code of California to remove an elected official, like they did the governor of California a couple times, then I could say that could be justifiable. But you guys have no probable cause. Christina Corpus hasn't done anything. Everything in the allegations in the 402 documents are full of hyperboles and ad hominems to justify your guys' agenda.
Sir,
and you
that's
guys
your
are
time.
creating hysteria amongst the community that is unjustifiable. And you guys are going to face legal action with an injunction in federal court if you guys continue to pursue with
Madam
this
Clerk, please
fraudulent
mute.
agenda against the sheriff. You guys are
Mr. Johnson?
pathetic. You guys are pathetic.
Mr. Johnson,
You
the
guys
chair has
will,
asked you to wrap
Please
up
mute
as your
you
time
guys
has ended.
will be removed from office in the next election
We
term.
have to wrap up.
Mark my words.
Okay. And we will now go to Andrea Hall. We also had a hand up for Anne. Anne, your hand is now lowered. I just wanted to mention that in case you meant to speak. Andrea, please unmute and begin.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Hall, and as you may know, I was recently elected to the Broadmoor Police Commission. I'm here to speak in favor of the resolution, but against the sunset clause. Law enforcement in unincorporated San Mateo County clearly needs continued oversight. The Cordell report makes that clear. And just yesterday, the Broadmoor Police District hired an officer who had a DUI for driving a government-owned vehicle with a blood alcohol level of 0.269. I know that creating oversight for law enforcement in San Mateo County will take time, and it requires the trust of the community, but it is essential. And so I would ask you to pass this resolution today. Thank you very much. I'd like to see the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Andrea. Dan Stejink, followed by Pat Willard. Dan, please unmute and begin.
Thank you, Supervisors. It's quite clear now that you don't have the legal purview to remove the sheriff just because you want to. It's not a court of law. That's a kangaroo court. It's not true that only the guilty get legal counsel. An exercise of one's constitutional rights is not probable cause. Changing federal policy largely requires a federal vote. Changing state policy largely requires a state vote. As a rescue diver, I've worked with tens of federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies recovering hundreds of bodies in California and across the U.S. And as a California Democratic Party member, I've written more justice reform resolutions than anyone else in the county combined. Cops are bred for war. Tapia, Corpus, Caligari, they're all cops. If you put them in a room, they'd get into a fist fight before they would decide where to go to buy sandwiches. You need to be the adults in the room. Don't recall Sheriff Corpus, recall Ray Mueller. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Pat Willard, followed by Ann. Pat, please unmute and begin.
Thank you. Want to read a couple of things from Los Angeles County Chapter 3.79.030. A sheriff's civilian oversight commission investigates through the office of Office Inspector General to analyze, solicit input, and investigate sheriff-related issues or complaints affecting the community. Chapter 6.44.190, Office of the Inspector General as part of the Board of Supervisors' duty to supervise the official conduct of the sheriff under California State Government Code. These things must be defined in that same fashion in San Mateo County. A couple days ago or a couple weeks ago, I listened to ICAC meeting where each of the members on that board continue to say that they don't know what responsibilities they have. This chapter 7.3.79 of the Civilian Self Oversight Commission in LA County specifies who, what, when, and where, and how their responsibilities are in plain English. Those same two
Thank you. You need to wrap up.
charters should be, yes, sir, should be implemented in San Mateo County as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And our last speaker, Ann, please unmute and begin.
Thank you very much. I am neither in favor of or against the current sheriff. I'm just concerned about preserving election integrity. Why not have a recall election of a public official rather than going through this type of process? I'm concerned about setting a precedent for the future and giving the board exclusive power over an elected position. On the surface, the actions seem to be more of a power grab. Why not let the public recall the sheriff in an election in order to preserve election integrity and really supporting the will of the people? What you're doing only adds to people's concern about government in general, and there's already a problem with the perception of the public. So I just would ask that you please consider a recall rather than the actions you're planning today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. No further comments, Acting Chair.
All right, thank you everyone for your comments today. Supervisor Mueller.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the backdrop. It's funny, I served on the city council for 10 years where you hire your police chief. And I think that's the method in the majority of cities in San Mateo County, where they hire their police chief. And if they got a human resources report like this, I'm pretty sure most city councils would fire that police chief. So we have an elected sheriff. That's something that exists historically within the state. And so we go through a process that's incumbent to be gone through to remove that sheriff, different than a police chief in a city. I want people to remember that process of what takes place in a city, because I think that's important for those who are reacting to it this way. Every city in San Mateo County has a city council that oversees how that department is managed. Secondarily, I want to respond to the, but that being the case, we're not doing that here. Let me back up. We're not doing that here. The board is respecting the elected position of the sheriff. And so I want to speak to what the attorneys brought up with respect to due process. Mr. Nibelin, if this charter amendment was passed by the voters, if they looked at this and they decided to give the board the power with the sunset clause to go ahead and apply this amendment to the charter amendment, would we still be held to due process in applying this charter amendment provision? Could it be challenged in court if we applied this charter amendment process inappropriately?
It could be challenged in court if we applied it inappropriately. The charter amendment, as I noted earlier, includes a process, provision for written notice and opportunity to be heard prior to the board acting on the on a removal if indeed this were passed.
And the second thing I wanted to respond to comments from council, because I do listen to your comments. They're asking for a continuance, but the question I have for you is, because you want to balance that, and if we continue it, if we were to continue it, that would push us to November for the election. Is that right?
It would. To be clear, in order to make the March election date, the board has to adopt the ordinance prior to December 6, 2024, which is the election minus 88 days deadline.
But we could, if it was passed today, we could take it off. We could, at a later date, decide, the board could meet and decide, well, we're going to go ahead and take the charter amendment off.
The board would have actually until December 11th to take the matter off, to be clear, which is election minus 83 days. These are all dates and deadlines that are set forth in the election code.
So if Sheriff Corpus wanted to come to our next meeting on December 10th and make her case why we could take this off while represented by counsel and testify to us and present whatever evidence she wanted to, the board could take it under advisement at that time whether or not they wanted to go ahead and pull the charter amendment off the election. Isn't that correct?
I think that's correct. There's some things we'd have to do to make sure the agenda notice that as a possibility, but yes.
Okay. Well, so again, I want to, through the chair, extend the invitation to Sheriff Corpus to come to our next meeting and talk to us, because we can take this off, take this item off if it's passed today.
No, that's not proper at this time.
So let's go with that. I don't have any further comments.
Supervisor Corso?
Thank you, Supervisor Pine. So I want to share that our board is advised. We have 2 lawyers on our board. We have a team of lawyers who knows the law, respects it, follows it, understands it. And we have been presented with the options that our board has for moving forward. That is what has led us to this place. The vote that we're going to take is one that this board has carefully considered, and we'll shortly find out what that is. But at the core of this issue is the reality that our current sheriff does not understand, follow, or respect not just county policy, but basic ethics and around conflicts of interest and much more. And for anyone who has not taken the chance to review the report, please do so. To state that there is not evidence in this report is just factually incorrect. And I want to share something on more of a personal level, because I was a supporter of the sheriff. And it wasn't until I really understood what the allegations were, who made them, how they were sustained, that I chose to pull back that support. And, there were signs, and even, as recently as this summer, I want to share that I had a conversation with the sheriff. And in that conversation, the sheriff admitted to me that Victor Anye, who is really at the core of the allegations in this report, had lied to me about a statement that she had allegedly made. And her admitting that to me is part of my decision making here, because it is very clear to me that she is incapable of holding Victor Anya accountable or putting anyone else's interest before his and ultimately hers. And that, to me, is a mentality that is completely unbefitting of a leader who needs to make sound decisions in the sheriff's office, who is ultimately responsible for public safety in our entire county. Again, votes of no confidence by every level of the sheriff's office. The day that we released this report, for anyone who's kind of new to the situation, the sheriff arrested the union president of the Deputy Sheriff's Association, who was a former long supporter of hers. And shortly thereafter, we saw her new assistant sheriff and a captain quit because of their involvement in that arrest. There are investigations still happening right now around all of these matters. And those will ultimately, be presented to the community as well. But I want people to understand that these are not decisions that we have come to lightly, and we have to do what's right for this community, even when it's hard, even when we have members of the public come and directly attack us and say whatever they want to say, because it's their right. That's their First Amendment right, and we respect those rights here. I want to urge my colleagues here to support the second reading of this ordinance and the resolution before us, because there are people who feel silenced right now that are county employees. And I have great concern for members of the public who are being impacted by this, who do not know how to stand up for themselves or are scared to speak up. My biggest fear, if we see this level of dysfunction in our sheriff's office, what does that mean for your everyday resident? What does that mean for people walking down the street and for their rights? We already have a claim against the county for the arrest of the union president. And all of that while the public knows that there was an investigation, the report has been released. We saw our sheriff on November 13th come into these chambers and not only completely deny everything in the report, but she tried to promote Victor Anye to a position he's not qualified for, right in these chambers. If those are not political theatrics, I don't know what is. We are happy to hear from the sheriff, but I want people to know that I have zero confidence in anything coming out of her mouth being truthful. And saying that about a law enforcement officer is really concerning. And our county is doing everything we can to apply the same level of accountability for everyone. But ultimately, I just want to come back to, I want to urge our board to pass this second reading and this resolution. It's the right thing to do. We cannot wait for an emergency to happen in our community and the dysfunction at the sheriff's office to make that even worse. We have to act now. We have to be proactive. And let me just say, for the people working at the sheriff's office, this is far too late already. They have already been harmed over time. And many of those complainants are women of color. And we need to be their voice, and we need to protect them, and we need to do what is right for our community. So with that, unless anyone wants to share additional comments, I motion to approve. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We do have Supervisor Slocum as
President Slocum.
raised his hand.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pine. I'm just curious, through the chair and directed toward county attorney, does it make any sense to formally invite the sheriff to join us on December 10th with her counsel excuse me, to offer whatever testimony she would like in response to this matter. And the reason for that is I understand that we would have until December 11th to remove the proposed ballot measure.
I would, Supervisor Slocum, thank you. That was also what I had brought forward, and I'd like to second that, but I'd like to add one caveat: sworn testimony. And I anticipate that in making that request for the 10th to provide sworn testimony, the response we may get will be, well, there's certain things we don't have yet, but there are 14 different allegations in that investigation, and I would welcome sworn testimony on any of those 14 allegations. Some of those having to do with her, specifically with her relationship with Mr. Ange, some having to do with text messages. These are items that frankly her coming in and just providing sworn testimony regarding should be just come tell us what happened. There's allegations here in the complaint. Tell us in your own words what happened under sworn testimony before us on the 10th, before we decide to move forward. So I don't know if she'll want to provide testimony with respect to all 14 allegations, but I'd like to know which one she is prepared to provide to us on December 10th.
And Mr. Counsel, would there have to be an amended motion to cover what the supervisor just went through?
I think that the board's got the discretion, either through a motion or an amended motion, to invite the sheriff under whatever terms the board cares to, whether it's sworn, non-sworn testimony. That's totally within the board's discretion, and however the board wants to sort of frame the invitation, I think it's within their discretion. It could be a motion to issue that invitation. It could be direction to have that invitation transmitted. There are a number of ways that that could be done, and so yes, absolutely, that would be within the board's discretion. Again, whether it's sworn or non-sworn testimony, that's again the board's discretion. Would note that again, additionally, I mean, the board is aware, and the sheriff's aware, that this office, the Office of the County Attorney, does represent the sheriff's office. There are processes for the sheriff to request separate counsel when the sheriff believes that there's a conflict that would prevent our office from representing both the board and the sheriff. And if the sheriff wanted to show up with different representation, that would of course be up to the sheriff. But recognize again that the Office of the County Attorney in the ordinary course represents the sheriff unless separate counsel's been appointed, and there's a process dictated in the government code for doing that. So I just wanted to flag that issue as well.
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Warren, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I was just prepared to make a motion to have the subcommittee, I guess it would be the subcommittee, invite the sheriff to come and provide sworn testimony to whatever allegations she would like to speak to, and she's welcome to bring her attorneys.
Sorry, I just want to get clarity on, I feel like we have a couple, well, that's the motion, but we have to vote on the matter before us as well. Do you want to add that to your motion, President Slocum?
We can take two separate motions.
Yeah, I wanted to bifurcate it. One is the invitation, and two is the proposed ballot measure.
So we can just take care of the second one first and then go back to yours. So I'll second Supervisor Slocum's motion.
Okay, just to be clear for the record, the motion is that an invitation that the subcommittee, and I want to be clear, who is the subcommittee that we're referring to at that point, Supervisor Slocum?
I think it would be Supervisor Mueller and Supervisor Corzo.
Thank you.
May I make one amendment to your motion, Supervisor Slocum? Sworn testimony and then questions and answers with the board, so there's dialogue within the invitation.
Sure, that's acceptable.
And again, I want to note, just as a matter of record, that the Board of Supervisors has not authorized separate counsel for the sheriff. The sheriff does have, as has been noted, there are individuals here today who have identified themselves as counsel for the sheriff, but the Board of Supervisors has not itself appointed separate counsel or agreed to appoint separate counsel for the sheriff. But if again, the invitation is the sheriff can bring whom she wants as representation. I want that clear as well.
It is, but I want to clarify for the public what you mean by that. The board has not authorized, or I guess you haven't reached the conclusion to ask us to pay for separate counsel. And that's what the term authorized means. She's welcome to hire whomever she wants to be her counsel. The board's not prohibiting that. And it appears that there is counsel here today representing her.
That's what I'm trying to make clear. Again, there's a process in the government code for the county to fund separate counsel. That has not yet occurred.
Okay.
Can I just add a clarification on that note? The board has not made a decision on that because there hasn't been a clearly defined specific issue that has been articulated in the request. It can't just be a general broad request for anything. It has to be about a specific issue.
That's our reading of the law. That's true. Yes. But again, I think I have the motion. Then it's the subcommittee would issue an invitation to the sheriff to provide sworn testimony before the board at its meeting of December 10th, with representation of her choice if she chooses to bring representation, with a provision that would be a question and answer component to that as well.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
That's a motion made by Supervisor Slocum and seconded by Supervisor Mueller.
I'll take the roll call. Supervisor Pine?
Yes.
Thank you, Supervisor Corzo.
I want to share that before I cast my vote. I'm, again, extremely concerned that even under oath, our sheriff will use this as a platform to continue to lie. So I'm going to abstain on this one.
Thank you. Supervisor Mueller?
Yes.
Supervisor Slocum?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes with Supervisor Corzo abstaining.